So this year we are diving deep in order to rise high. That is our yearly theme. And this month we are talking about that flow, the ebb and flow of life. Things come and they go, but as that beautiful reading reminded us, we remain anchored. Because the truth of who we are is not in the coming and going of those things out there, but in our inner peace, in our inner strength, that divine nature. So today we're going to step into that deep inquiry, that sacred exploration, the dance between who we may think we are and who we truly are. By asking this question, who am I really? Which opens that doorway for liberation, for discovery, for wisdom, peace, and provides that path for empowered living. So we each navigate this world through our own personal lens, yes? And that lens has been shaped by our upbringing, our culture, the society around us. We've been taught to interpret things in life and circumstances through that lens. So some see the world or certain situations as safe that others may experience as dangerous. Some may see things as fair that others see as unjust. These perspectives, which are often subtle, become then the framework through which we start to view ourselves in life and thus view others. So it's important to start to recognize that framework is not the ultimate truth, capital T truth, right? Because what is true must be true for all, like the absolute truth. So when we see that, we can start to break free from that narrative, and that framework, that construct of who we have perceived ourselves to be and how we see the world. And we can start to uncover those layers of conditioning that are often rooted in duality, in the ego's need to label and categorize, judge and define us, them, right, wrong. See, this voice of the ego, that part of us that believes that we are separate beings, that we are defined then by those roles and labels and circumstances, that voice is the one that is always making up stories, right, about what is occurring, making the meaning out of certain situations. And it identifies with the who we are as what we do, right? It's the one that says, I am what I do, or I am what others think of me. But there is another voice. Thank God, thank God. That voice of God, of spirit, of life, that quiet, steady voice of our true divine nature. We talked about that and the importance of that still small voice last week. So today we're going to go even deeper into exploring these two voices in order to be more firmly rooted in that voice of spirit. So this voice of our true divine nature, it doesn't see through the lens or the framework of duality, but it only knows wholeness and oneness because it is one, omniscient, omnipresent. One. It's that part within us that has never been hurt or harmed or hindered. That wholeness. It recognizes that beyond the surface of conditions, we innately are already free. We are spacious, loving awareness behind the chaos and the noise. So the journey then is not to demonize the ego, but compassionately notice when we are caught up in that thought pattern of separation and return to the truth of who we are. To step out of the conditioned thinking and into more conscious living. When we live from that deeper space, our true self, we move from reacting to what's occurring to the ability to respond. From fear to love. From scarcity, lack, limitation to infinite possibility. In his book, Stillness Speak, Eckhart Tolle says, if her past were your past, her pain, your pain, her level of consciousness, your level of consciousness, you would think and act exactly as she does. With this realization comes forgiveness, compassion, and peace. But the ego doesn't like to hear this because it cannot be reactive and righteous anymore. It will lose strength. So again, the ego isn't inherently bad or wrong, because if we start to see the ego as the enemy, we're falling into its trap, right? We're falling into the trap of the ego that wants to separate and see things as bad or wrong and to judge. We must come from that place of wholeness and oneness. The ego isn't inherently bad or wrong, and in fact, it's the structure of the mind that helps us navigate the world. It's the collection of the labels and the roles, the achievements, the wounds, the preferences, our personality, our fears, all of these things that we've accumulated over time through our life's experiences. It's the part of us that says, I am this, but I'm not that. And it's important to notice when that ego voice says things like, I am not enough. Or, I am better than. I must control everything. I'm at the mercy of circumstances. I am what others think of me. Or, I am what happened to me or my past. See, this voice of the ego, it builds walls of separation between us and others, between us and our divine Holy Spirit nature. It builds walls between us and life itself. And here's the great paradox, right? This persona, this character that we so often believe ourselves to be, is not truly who we are. It's a role that we have chosen to play in a way for spirit to know itself more fully in this world, right? But beneath all of that, we simply are. That state of being, that presence. Beneath the noise of the ego self, there's something vast and timeless and unchanging, our true nature. Spirit, individualized as each of us, that pure awareness and love and creativity, that I am presence. That I am. That existed before we were born and will exist beyond this current experience of life. It is free, it is whole, it is infinite. So our divine nature whispers, I am enough. I am already enough. I am one with all. I am that. I am. I am wisdom. I am love. And this is what we call oneness. One of our key principles here that we teach at Ahava and Science of Mind. We are not separate from source. We are like waves in the ocean of the divine. Yet we are here dancing in this world as both human and divine. Sometimes we listen to that voice of fear, of competition, of control, and sometimes we hear the voice of love and surrender and unity. Both are part of our earthly journey. But when we mistake ego's voice for the truth of who we are, we may feel a sense of disconnection and unease, kind of an untethered feeling, right? And it leads to often experiencing life very anxious and rushed and, trying to get something out there. On the other hand, when we align with that divine nature and surrender the ego's need for control and needing to know it all and being right, life begins to flow with more ease, yes? And we can move into trust and wisdom and compassion. So how can we tell the difference? Well, let's explore some of the qualities of each inner voice. So the ego voice is driven by fear, scarcity, not enoughness, or false pride, right? That ego voice is the one that feels good when you get a compliment or feels like on the bottom, lowly worm of the earth when something goes wrong or we make a mistake. But our inner guidance, this true divine nature of who we are, it is always rooted in love, in peace, and wholeness. The ego voice is reactive, is defensive, it's urgent, as opposed to that inner guidance that is calm and patient and wise. I'll pause there and add a little antidote. For me, I can tell when I get an insight of that clarity of that inner voice, when something comes through that I'm like, that's not a phrase or a word or something that I would normally say, right? And it hits me and I'm like, oh yeah. And I remember one time when I heard that voice say, the way out is through. And I was like, oh. And that is something that I had, at that point, not said often or thought about. And it just kind of hit with this laser clarity, right? But it was also very like, whew, as opposed to, right? So the ego voice is the, and it's focused on separation and comparison, as opposed to the inner wisdom that knows oneness and interconnection. Right? The ego voice is the one that may see problems and things in the world and think, well, that's not mine, or at least that's not affecting me, as opposed to knowing the oneness and seeing each other as that interconnected web, right? The ego is attached to outcomes, whereas the divine nature, our true higher self, surrenders to the flow of life. The ego feels like noise or chatter, as opposed to that inner still voice that is a steady, quiet knowing, right? I feel like it's just kind of this like presence. So the ego will often speak first and loudest, right? If you're faced with conflict or a situation that is undesirable, the ego will be like, well, we have to fight, we have to say this, we have to do that. No, this is bad. As opposed to spirit that whispers and reminds us to breathe and it's okay. So when we slow down and listen deeply to that divine voice, it becomes unmistakable, right? It feels like home. So the next step is begin to cultivate a relationship with that inner guidance. So we can tune in more consistently to our true self and live from that place. So here are some practices. Stillness and meditation. Regular stillness creates space for inner guidance to emerge beyond the chatter of the mind. So I know we talked about this a good bit last week, and it seemed to be the thing that stuck the most was this conversation around, do we bring our cell phones into the bathroom? You never know the things that I may say that all of a sudden become the thing, right? That's what you remember? Okay. So I have to confess to you all, several times this week I still brought my phone to the bathroom. And I was conscious of it. So as opposed to it being an unconscious habit, I was like, oh, I said no. Okay, well, I'm still going to. That's still a win, y'all. Because instead of it being a default habit, it became a conscious choice. And it reminded me, because what I would say is like, well, it's not like I was afraid to be alone or, uncomfortable just sitting in the silence. But in those moments, as I chose still to bring my phone into the bathroom, it reminded me, though, I was like, okay, but I will take a moment of silence, right? It just kept that idea present, even though that one habit didn't quite change. So, true confessions. These moments of stillness, of meditation. Another practice is self-inquiry, right? This practice of kind of getting into that meditative state, but through questions and asking things like, who is speaking right now? When I'm noticing those thoughts or when I'm in a conversation, pausing and being the observer, being the one who's noticing the thoughts or the words or the action and asking, where is this coming from? Who is this voice? Is it the voice of the ego or spirit? What is the motivation? And I'm being guided by fear right now or love? What is the purpose of me saying or posting this thing? Is it coming from my limited self or my higher self? Getting into that practice of self-inquiry. Another step, another practice is affirmative prayer. Spiritual mind treatment is one of our key practices that we teach here. And if you're not familiar with that, I highly encourage you to take this class coming up, and you can learn and change your thinking, change your life. This fabulous spiritual technology called affirmative prayer. So with affirmative prayer, we speak truth to ourselves. And the first two steps are acknowledging what life is, that truth, those qualities of God, and then remembering that we are one with them and aligning with them. So just those two steps, those first two steps, gets us into that practice of noticing that voice because we know what spirit is and who we are. Speaking truth to ourselves, declaring, I am the beloved. I am guided and sustained, sourced always by the one life. Another practice is the sacred pause. Before making a decision, pause and ask, what would my highest self choose now? Or as I said last week, what would love do now? And lastly, compassionate noticing. Pay attention to your thoughts. Watch the mind, but without judgment, with a loving, compassionate awareness, noticing as that voice arises and how it feels in the body, and then gently return to presence. So I'm going to invite you, if you're willing, to just do a little practice together, yes? So close your eyes if that's comfortable, or just find a nice soft gaze somewhere if you want to just stare at your hands in your lap. Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders relax. And silently ask yourself, who am I? Who am I really? Who am I really? Who am I really? Who am I? Feel into the awareness, that one in you that is hearing the question, the space that holds all thoughts, that sense of aliveness beneath the thinking mind. Breathe again into that awareness. And now silently affirm, I am that which cannot be named. I am love itself. Begin to bring your awareness back. This is your true nature, and it is always available. I don't know about you, but for me, when I first asked that question, who am I? The first voice is, well, I'm rainbow. And sometimes it goes into roles, right? I'm a mother. I'm a spiritual director. I'm a human. And then the more I ask, it becomes, I am light. I am love, right? It just kind of becomes this space. So let's make it our intention to dance more consciously with these voices, with more awareness, knowing that we can always choose love over fear, peace over the noise, and oneness over separation. So who are you really? You are the divine made manifest. You are wholeness embodied. This week I invite you to become that loving witness to yourself, to catch the moments of your ego's voice when it arises, and not shame it, but just notice, that's the ego. There's that small s self. Pause and then lean into a deeper knowing beneath that initial thought or reaction. And affirm the truth. I'm going to read a few statements as a continuation of that affirmation we shared earlier. I am not the fear. I am the love behind it. I am not the noise. I am the stillness beneath it. I am not the story. I am the truth unfolding. I am not the mask. I am the light. When you feel lost or confused, ask yourself, who am I really? And let that question guide you back home. Yes? Yes. Let's take it into prayer. So we breathe now, allowing the energy, the spaciousness, the vibration of wholeness and love itself to fill our entire being. Knowing that there is only one life, one presence, that is love, that is wholeness, that is peace, that is who I am. I am that. I am. I am love. I am whole. And as I know and recognize this truth for myself, I speak this word for all those who are in need of a prayer this day. For all those who may have woken up today, but are still sleepwalking in the haze or the daze of the illusion of the ego and the fear of life. I speak this prayer now from this place of wholeness and oneness, asking and knowing now that the highest vibration that my energy field can hold begins to lift me up into this space of oneness and wholeness. Knowing that love is always the answer, and that I am guided and sourced by this infinite presence always. So no matter the circumstances of the world, I can return to this place, anchored, deeply rooted as the love that I am. And then ask, what is mine to do now? What does love look like now? What would love do now? Knowing and remembering the divine interconnection of all life, I move with ease, surrendering to that flow of that greater I am presence, letting go of the need to control or fix, and tapping into that infinite wisdom. Allowing my presence to be one that uplifts all around me through this high vibration quality of love and wholeness. I see and know the truth of who I am, and I see and know this in the eyes of all of life. I feel and experience this divine connection in nature, in relationship with all those that I encounter. And I continue to cultivate that relationship with that divine within, with that still small voice, until it becomes that loud clarion call that is always guiding me. For I know what is mine to do, and I do it. I release attachment and fear and lack and doubt, allowing it to dissolve back to the nothingness from which it came, being absorbed into that black hole matter, as I stand fully in the high vibration of love and wholeness. How good it is to know this truth. How good it is. I'm so grateful. So grateful to speak this word. So grateful to know that this word is manifest. It is so right here, right now, in my experience, and for all those hearing the sound of my voice, feeling the energy of this prayer. It is done. As I release it into the law that accepts it as so, and that says, yes, it is done, it is so, my beloved, it is so. And together we say, and so it is, yes.